The hum of failing circuitry was a lullaby Stephen had long stopped noticing. He crouched beneath the corroded conduit spine of Habitat Ring Delta 13. The red light from the dying supergiant beyond the hull casting molten shadows across the narrow corridor. Panels flickered like candlelight, flickering in protest as systems that once pulsed with precision now staggered forward, like a drunk at the edge of gravity. With a flick of his wrist, Stephen activated his multi-tool. The soft click and pulse of blue plasma illuminated the access port he'd been digging at for the last hour. His gloved fingers worked carefully, prying away at the age-welded seams until a crack hissed open. Warm air, laced with ozone and the coppery scent of overheated metal, wafted into his helmet. "Come on," he muttered, more to himself than to the machine. "Just a little cooperation." A warning chime echoed through his earpiece. Radiation spike, just shy of lethal. Typical. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into it, gripping a frayed cable and stripping away its insulation to access the root line. Sparks danced across. His visor, static built in his chest. Still, he kept working. The drift didn't fix itself, and no one else dared enter the outer rings anymore. Not since the last breach. Outside the station's worn portholes, the red sun boiled like an open wound. Its surface pulsed with lazy violence. Vast flares arched across its skin, shedding matter in ribbons of plasma that twisted into the void. Once, Stephen would have called it beautiful. Now it felt personal. This star was dying faster than it should, and something was helping it along. He finished rerouting the current just as the panels snapped closed with a reluctant hiss. Systems flickered. Lights stabilized. For now. He leaned back against the wall, breathing shallowly, trying not to focus on the sweat gathering at the back of his neck. System stability restored to 41%. Came a RKA's voice, flat and synthetic. Temporary improvement. Core siphon draws increasing amperage. Source unidentified. Stephen exhaled slowly. Still pulling energy faster than decay allows? Confirmed. He stood, bones creaking from hours spent folded over conduits, and turned to the narrow viewport that looked out over the drift's interior arc. The orbital rings stretched in a wide curve, studded with spires, docking arms, and broken domes that once housed greenhouses and observation labs. Now, only a third of them were lit. The rest were ghost towns, long since evacuated or reclaimed by radiation leaks. He tapped the glass. ARCA Overlay Spectral Map. The pane shimmered, revealing a map of Helios drift and its orbiting sun. Patches of increasing instability pulsed in orange across the star's corona. The siphoning algorithm, something not built by human hands, had begun distorting the star's natural entropy. "You're not dying," Stephen whispered to the sun. "You're being led." He turned away. The drift had been constructed decades ago to study stellar death, yes, but not to cause it. And if he was right, the technology doing this wasn't human. Nor was it new. Stephen walked toward the transport platform at the end of the corridor, passing flickering signs with peeling paint. Observatory sector restricted. His boots echoed in the silence. No one patrolled these halls anymore. No engineers. No civilians. Just echoes and dust. And the occasional whisper of static from unseen speakers. A phrase that had started to appear in corrupted system logs. "Let the light take you." Tran screeched to a halt and opened its doors. He stepped inside, face blank, mind boiling. Someone aboard this station wanted the sun dead. And Stephen intended to find out who, before it took them all with it. Asterisk. The data didn't make sense. Stephen sat hunched in the hollowed husk of Sub-Observatory 6A, a forgotten node nestled within the spine of the Helios drift. The room was cold, not from temperature, but from abandonment. Dead monitors lined the curved walls, their cracked glass like blind eyes. Dust floated in the air, caught in the faint glow of emergency LEDs. Even the hum here was quieter, like the station itself was holding its breath. His portable console projected a flickering hologram above the rusted workstation, a live spectral feed of the red supergiant. Lines of telemetry scrolled in one corner, mostly red. Mass decay curves, solar flare rates, neutrino flux. All of them wrong. He zoomed in on the core's emission data. There it was again. A clean drop, not a wave, not a pulse, but a scar. Like something had torn a chunk out of the star's heart, and the sun hadn't even screamed, "No natural star died like this." Not even close. Arca, Stephen muttered. Cross-reference last 20 hours of solar telemetry against Helios drifts. Thermal conversion rates. Look for gaps, a soft chime. Gap confirmed, the AI replied. 21 minutes of energy redirection unaccounted for. Location origin, unknown. Routing pathway, encrypted. He scowled. Show me the transfer pattern. The projection rippled. A thread of energy, thin as spider silk, shot from the sun and vanished into space, like water draining through a crack in glass. It didn't arc toward any known structure. No collector station, no deep array battery. It just disappeared. Where the hell is it going? He whispered. Trajectory suggests projection into subdimensional fold or quantum tunnel. Arca replied. Cannot determine terminus. Technology unfamiliar. Stephen leaned back, heart thudding. That's not just power harvesting. That's exfiltration. Arca continued, unprompted. System note. This energy pattern matches data signature found in corrupted logs from Titan Station. That froze him. Titan Station. The place he'd buried in silence, in shame. Where? He'd trusted the wrong person. Where 200 scientists had burned alive in a cascade of reactor failures. It had been an accident. That's what they told him. But Stephen had always felt something else at play. And now that same energy signature was here. Buried in ghost data. Whispering through the sun. He stood up, pacing, breath catching in his throat. Pull all remaining Titan logs from the archive. Unfiltered. Warning. Files marked restricted. Clearance required. Override, he snapped. Authorization. Vir 79er Delta. A long pause. Then override accepted. The console dimmed, then flared to life with a warning symbol. A crude triangle etched with unfamiliar glyphs. Not human code. Alien and ancient. The moment. It loaded. The temperature in the room dropped. Not physically, but perceptually. A chill behind the eyes. A pressure in the skull. Stephen's hands trembled as he opened the log. Log, Titan Station. Final TRANSM ISNSM 386.23.11 voice. Dr. Miles Hasker transcript. We were wrong. The siphon doesn't feed. Into the grid. It bypasses our systems. It bypasses reality. Something's pulling the core apart and storing it somewhere else. I saw it in the flare shadows. There's a shape watching us. I told Stephen. He didn't believe me. But if you're hearing this, get out. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to save the star. Let it die. Let us all die with it. Before it wakes up. Light isn't just energy. Light is a door. The transmission cut into static. But beneath it, barely audible, another voice whispered, not human, not clear, like something mimicking speech. Echoes riding the signal. Let the light take you. Stephen shut it down. His chest was tight. Not from fear, not yet, but from memory. Miles Hasker had been his friend, his mentor, and he'd died on Titan Station blaming Stephen for not acting sooner. But now Stephen wondered if Miles had seen something no one else had. He exhaled hard, trying to center himself. Arca, lock this data behind encrypted loop. Code, Ghost Protocol 1. Nobody accesses this but me. Understood. He glanced once more at the still flickering thread of solar energy vanishing into nowhere. It didn't pulse. It flowed with intent. Outside the cracked observation window, the red sun loomed massive and grotesque, its surface pocked with dark ulcers, magnetic storms, and coiling flares that never ended. It was bleeding. Stephen Vire knew one thing for certain. This wasn't natural. And it wasn't over. It was just beginning. It was a strange thing to see devotion bloom in a place built on decay. Stephen watched from a shadowed overpass in Sector Theta 9, arms crossed tightly across his chest, the collar of his worn coat turned up against the station's recycled chill. Below him, in a chamber once used for diplomatic assemblies, the Radiant Order had made their altar. Dozens of figures stood shoulder to shoulder in the half-light, dressed in white-threaded robes made from salvaged station fiber dyed a dull crimson with oxidized pigments. Their heads were bowed, their arms raised like antennae, reaching for a signal only they could hear. The air was thick with the scent of burned mylar and old metal. Makeshift braziers hissed quietly in the corners, where alloy scraps melted into glowing puddles of ceremonial waste. And at the center of it all stood Hood. He was taller than Stephen remembered, or perhaps posture had made the difference. He wore no robe, only layered black exofabric, accented with copper strands that flickered when he moved. A narrow circlet sat across his brow, not ornamental, but functional, a neural amplifier pulsing with slow amber light. His voice rose above the soft chanting, even though he never seemed to shout. "You feel it, don't you?" Hood said, his arms open as though to embrace the pulsing glow that streamed down through the ceiling viewport, the raw, reddened light of the dying sun. "Not just the heat, not just radiation. You feel purpose." The crowd murmured in agreement. As one body. The sound was unsettling, rehearsed yet hungry. Hood stepped forward. "The star is not collapsing. It is transforming. She is not dying. She is ascending." Stephen's jaw tensed. This was more than a cult now. It was an infection. And Hood wasn't simply its carrier. He was its architect. Each flare, each pulse, a message. We record them and we listen. The universe is not silent, my friends. The light is a voice, and it is calling us home. Some of the acolytes wept. Others lifted their palms higher, catching the sun's filtered glow like communion. Stephen tapped the lens behind his ear. "Arca," he whispered, "record all of this. Encrypt it. Tag facial IDs, if possible." "Recording," the AI confirmed, its voice a faint buzz in his skull. "Has his neural gear been augmented since last scan?" "Affirmative. Neural crown shows unauthorized modifications. Unknown technology integrated. Origin, not human standard." Stephen blinked. Not human standard. Of course it wasn't. Not with the siphon, not with the energy anomalies. And now, not with Hood. As if on cue. Hood paused. His gaze swept the chamber, then tilted upward. Stephen stiffened. For a moment, he thought Hood was looking directly at him. "Doubt is natural," Hood said softly, eyes lingering somewhere in Stephen's direction. "Even now, there are those among us who cling to the old sciences, who believe entropy is final, that the death of light is the end of meaning." He took a step closer to the crowd, voice darkening. "They are wrong." The congregation murmured, the sound warping into a low mechanical hum. Several held up glowing spheres, memory orbs rigged from station relays, and began syncing them to Hood's circlet. A visible pulse of light passed between their devices and his headgear, like information siphoning in reverse. "These doubters will come. They will tell you the sun is sick, that we must stop its transformation. that we must fix what was never broken. Hood's voice sharpened like a scalpel. They will tell you to fear the light. But I say, he raised one hand. His neural circlet flared. Let the light take you. The crowd echoed the phrase like a wave, crashing against the bones of the station. Let the light take you. Stephen turned away, Dot. It was worse than he thought. Hood wasn't just interpreting the star's collapse as spiritual rebirth. He was fueling it, feeding the Order's belief with manipulated data, ritualized exposure, and possibly Stephen's stomach turned alien tech. Somehow, he'd accessed or reverse-engineered part of the siphon system, maybe even communicated with whatever had built it, or whatever was behind it. He made his way back through the cracked metal corridor, pulse hammering. In the old days, cults aboard frontier stations were treated like viral threats, isolated, studied, sometimes purged. But the drift was lawless now, fragmented. Council had no real power. And Hood's reach extended into airlock crews, recyclers, and even reactor technicians. That's how he'll do it, Stephen realized grimly. He's already doing it, not just by preaching, but by controlling the systems. Arca, he whispered. Ping secure uplink to Sub-Observatory 6A. Prepare to run the Titan protocol again. I need the quantum siphon data reconstructed. Data corrupted beyond standard recovery. I don't care. Run it. Everything we have. There's something we missed the first time. There was a pause. Then, acknowledged. He quickened. His pace, boots echoing against cold steel. Hood had followers. Hood had belief. But Stephen had truth. Even if it killed him again. Asterisk. The door to the old observatory groaned like a wounded animal. Stephen paused, palm hovering over the rust-caked control pad, listening. The corridor behind him was silent, save for the soft breath of the station's ventilators struggling against. Internal heat swell. Radiation shielding was failing across 3 sectors. Somewhere behind the bulkhead, a containment alert flickered amber. But it wasn't that warning that made his fingers tremble, Dot. It was the silence, not no security drones. No maintenance servos. No personnel. No sound but the hush of drifting air and distant metal fatigue. Observatory Gamma 2 had been decommissioned. Over a decade ago after a systems fire gutted the sublevel. But Stephen had a hunch. And hunches, when it came to dying stars and forgotten tech, had a habit of paying off. The door finally hissed open. Hydraulics wheezing. He stepped inside. Darkness. Pressed close, thick with the scent of scorched insulation and oxidized copper. The room was circular, ringed with broken terminals and deep-sunk consoles. At its center stood a shattered grav table surrounded by fragmentary equipment, lenses, rails, half-melted sensor arms. The remnants of a solar analysis rig, long dead. Something else glowed in the dark. A pulse. Faint. Blue-white dot. Stephen moved toward it slowly, every footstep crunching through dust and char. His flashlight swept over collapsed bulkheads and scorched scripture scratched into the walls. Crude etchings. Symbols in the Radiant Order's twisting script. Some had been burned in with a laser pen. He knelt near the light source. It was coming from beneath a collapsed beam, wedged in debris. A power node, but not standard. Its casing was alloyed with unfamiliar composite metals, veined with what looked like translucent wiring, almost organic in structure. The glow wasn't steady. It fluttered like a dying heartbeat. Arca, Stephen whispered. Scan this. Confirm origin. Static answered at first. The AI signal was weak down here, dampened by damage and shielding. Then, signal weak. Object not in drift registry. Scanning molecular structure. Unknown lattice detected. Tech signature matches remnants from Titan Station cache. Stephen's heart jumped. The node was alien. just like the siphon tech, just like the whispering voice in the corrupted logs. This wasn't just a forgotten sensor or power conduit. This was a seed, a relay, left behind, or perhaps planted. He reached into the debris and carefully pried it loose. The moment his gloved hand touched the surface, the light flared. Bright, a flash of electric blue that surged up his wrist like lightning. He gasped and fell backward, breath catching in his throat. Behind his eyelids, images erupted. A field of stars, warping. A mouth of solar fire, folding inward. An eye, immense and red, opening inside the sun itself. And a whisper, low and crawling. You were always meant to witness it. He blinked, panting, heart hammering in his chest. The light was gone. The node had gone dark. He stared at it, now a lifeless stone in his palm. Arca, what was that? Neurological. Surge detected. No external emissions. Possibility. Embedded memory pattern or dormant psionic imprint. Analysis. Inconclusive. Stephen sat for a moment, sweat beading beneath his collar. Something had imprinted on him. Something that saw him. Not like Hood's poetic metaphors. Not belief. This had been direct, predatory, measured, and ancient. He activated his datapad and began a hardwire scan of the node. If it was a communications relay, maybe it had a trace route, a signal direction, a timestamp. Something got as the scan progressed. He looked around the room again. His flashlight swept across more symbols, but this time he noticed something. Behind the layers of graffiti, scratched deep into the back panel of the control array, was a line of text in standard English. Do not wake the star. Beneath it, a name, Miles Hasker. Stephen's breath caught. His old mentor had been here. Before Titan. Before the collapse. And he had tried to hide this. Tried to bury it before Hood and the Order could find it. But someone had found it anyway. Someone had built their altar on it. The idea burned through Stephen's mind like plasma. Through Icedot, the Order hadn't just adopted ancient beliefs. They were rooted in them, possibly by design. By a design not human in origin. The siphon, the node, the visions, it was all connected. A system of awakening, of preparation. He packed the node carefully into a magnetic casing and stood. There was only one person who might be able to decode this. Marek, the ex-Navarch systems engineer turned salvage king, who lived in a pressurized husk down in Sector Omega. He hated the Order, hated Hood, and more importantly, Marek had once worked on the prototype siphon experiments, before they were supposedly scrapped. If anyone knew what this thing really was, and what was waking inside the sun, it was him. Stephen turned and left the observatory behind him. The broken node gave off a single final pulse, then silence. The wind screamed across the shattered plains of Eltros, a dead world that once held life, now reduced to a graveyard of bone-white rock and fractured skyglass. Stephen adjusted his visor as he stepped off the ramp of the Cerebrant, boot soles crunching against brittle ground. Above him, Hood's signature still lingered, an aurora of corrupted data and electrical residue weaving through the clouds like a bleeding wound in the atmosphere. Stephen had followed the trail this far, driven by a whisper and encrypted data. Burst retrieved from the dying mind of a signaled priest back on Xandros Station. The message was simple. He's rewriting the stars. He's reaching for the core. But what did it mean? He approached the remnants of a communication spire. Its once pristine titanium husk twisted into a grotesque sculpture by Hood's energy pulse. His hand hovered over its interface, fingers twitching. It wasn't just static anymore. There were pulses, heartbeats, echoes. Suddenly, the wind stopped. All sound collapsed into silence. Stephen froze. The sky broke. A vertical line split the clouds. a jagged tier that shimmered with impossible geometry. It wasn't a storm. It was an opening. And Hood stood at its edge. He was no longer fully human. His body pulsed with the flickering architecture of corrupted code, limbs trailing fractals, his face partially veiled by a shifting array of ancient symbols. His eyes glowed with cold, static logic, but somewhere behind them, Stephen still sensed. The man he once knew, the one who had studied the veil beside him, who had once promised never to breach it. "You shouldn't have come," Hood said. His voice was no longer vocal cords and breath. It was a waveform raw data pouring into Stephen's neural uplink, bypassing his ears entirely. "I had to," Stephen replied aloud, his voice sounding fragile in the stillness. "You're folding the entropy layer back onto itself. You'll kill billions." "I'm unmaking lies," Hood said. "They programmed limits into the universe. Time, identity, death. I'm peeling away the interface." Stephen stepped forward. "You don't understand what you've become. You're not navigating reality anymore, Hood. You're distorting it. This planet is proof. Look around." Hood looked, but not with regret. He seemed almost proud. "Entropy isn't decay," he whispered. "It's choice. The veil keeps us shackled. You still believe in cause and effect, in heroes, but the core, what is the core?" Stephen pressed dot. Hood turned, and the tier in the sky widened. Beyond it, a geometry of thought made physical. Cities without atoms, stars without fire, a landscape of infinite recursion. The core wasn't a place, it was a truth. And Hood was offering it to him. "You still have time, Stephen," he said. "One neural splice, and you'll see it all. Not with eyes, with meaning." Stephen hesitated. For the first time since this pursuit began, he felt the pull, not of logic, not of data, but of something older. The hunger to know. And then the pull broke. A message pinged into his wristpad from the orbiting cerebrant, unsigned. A burst of filtered code and old failsafe from their days in the Veil Labs. Only Stephen would recognize it. "He's rewriting the machine that dreams us. Stop him before it wakes." Stephen lifted his pulse driver. "I'm sorry, Hood." The wind returned, and war began. The transport shuttle sliced through layers of oil. Orange cloud, descending into the heart of Euryalus, the industrial husk of what was once a thriving colony planet. Stephen's eyes traced the skeletal frames of megafactories below, many long abandoned, their twisted iron towers now monuments to a civilization devoured by its own ambition. The sky was rust-colored and toxic. Even inside the shuttle, a faint, metallic tang clung to the recycled air, as if the planet was trying to corrode anything that dared enter. Beside him, Mavic adjusted the filtration mask strapped to his chest. "This is Hood's kind of place," he muttered. "Rotten, silent, crawling with ghosts." Stephen didn't answer. His mind was still tethered to the cracked screen of his datapad, its last transmission looping. An intercepted message from Hood's network. Coordinates, a location, and 3 words: "The Forge breathes." The shuttle landed with a mechanical groan on a scorched landing platform half eaten by rust. As the hatch opened, acrid wind howled in, carrying with it the echoes of ancient machinery and something darker an underlying hum that pulsed through the ground like a heartbeat. Stephen stepped out. First, his boots crunched over ash-laced gravel as he surveyed the landscape. The facility ahead rose like a black cathedral of metal, vast and sharp-edged, its surface slick with oil and grime. Red lights flickered along its surface in erratic patterns, alive but disordered. It was the remnant forge, once the beating heart of Euryalus drone production, now a forgotten relic. Or so they thought. Mavic unslung his plasma rifle. Movement inside. Multiple heat signatures. Stephen nodded. "We don't fire unless they do. Unless they're not human." They made their approach in silence, their footsteps muffled by the omnipresent ash. A crumpled security droid lay in a ditch to the left of the entrance, twisted into a grotesque pose. Half melted, its optics still faintly glowing. Inside, the forge was worse. The corridors pulsed with erratic energy. Walls bled wires like veins, and light panels flickered in seizure-like spasms. Machines that should have been dead centuries ago hissed softly, as if waking from hibernation. Then came the whisper-soft, electronic, female. Stephen. He froze. The voice was unmistakable. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't an echo. It was her. Nalia? He whispered into the air, disbelief ripping through his composure. Mavic turned sharply. That was her, Stephen said, moving forward. Faster now, guided by the disembodied voice and some buried instinct. She's alive, or something of her is. They passed through what remained of a command nexus. Monitors sparked to life as they entered, displaying flashes of Nalia's old face, sometimes smiling, sometimes glitching into static. Then came the scream, not from the speakers, from deeper within the complex. Stephen didn't hesitate. He ran past production lines overtaken by invasive growths of circuitry, past drones suspended mid-task, frozen like statues in a machine's prayer. The screen came again closer now, raw and human. He reached a chamber bathed in red light, and there she was, suspended in a vertical chamber of pulsating nanoglass. Nalia, her body altered part machine, part woman. Tubes fed into her spine. Her eyes flickered, not with life, but code. Her lips trembled as if trying to speak. Stephen staggered forward, his chest tight. She looked at him. Stephen, she said again. It's inside me. He's inside all of this. And then the wall behind her peeled open, like some iron curtain parting for a god. Hood stepped forward, not cloaked, not armored. But fused one arm cybernetic, his chest embedded with a pulsing red core. He looked more construct than man. His voice was smooth and venomous. You found her. That was the point. Stephen's hand tightened around his sidearm. Hood raised his mind. Machines in the room jolted awake, their optics locking. Onto Stephen. I gave her back to the forge, Hood said. And it gave me this. Nalia screamed. Stephen raised his weapon. Mavic shouted behind him, and the chamber erupted into chaos. The memories came unbidden fractured shards of a time Stephen had tried desperately to bury beneath layers of duty and denial. The sterile hum of the emergency medbay aboard Titan Station echoed in his ears like a ghost's lament. He sat slumped in the cold metal chair, his hands trembling as he clutched a cracked holocube, its surface flickering with images of fire, collapse, and lost faces. The acrid scent of burning circuits mingled with the sterile antiseptic that never quite masked the taste of failure. He was alone, except for the echoes. 200 souls lost in a reactor, breach that should never have happened. The voices of his colleagues' friends who trusted him to lead, to protect. Instead, he had watched as the core ruptured, a tidal wave of plasma and radiation that tore through the station like a vengeful god. Stephen's breath hitched. He closed his eyes, trying to push away the screaming alarms, the frantic orders, the burning screams. Then, the voice of Miles Hasker, the man who had once been his closest friend and mentor, cut through the chaos like a beacon. You have to see it, Stephen. The siphon isn't natural. It's a parasite feeding on the star's life. We've been blind. The core's being harvested. Something's hiding in the shadows, and it's awake. Stephen had brushed the warnings aside. Then, desperate to believe it was just a glitch, a malfunction. But Miles' last transmission had been a frantic warning, a call for evacuation, a plea for salvation that came too late. The holocube showed Miles' final moments, a face pale with fear. eyes reflecting the dying star's cruel light. Stephen clenched his fists. The guilt was a living thing, gnawing at his bones. Now, years later, that same parasite had returned, not just as a phantom in the data, but as a presence waking beneath the dying sun, fueled by Hood's fanatics. He stood, abruptly, pacing the cramped quarters of his temporary lab aboard the Cerebrant. The walls were plastered with schematics, star maps, and encrypted files, all pointing to the same horrific conclusion. The siphon was not a malfunction. It was a weapon, a trap, a cosmic leech that drained stellar life to feed something beyond comprehension. Arca, Stephen whispered, voice rough. Cross-reference Titan's last logs with all siphon activity on Helios Drift. Show me the overlaps. The AI's response was a cold cascade of data, patterns consistent with cyclic energy drain events. Titan Station's destruction coincides with first anomalous mass loss on Helios Drift. Unknown energy signatures match. Stephen's jaw tightened. The nightmare wasn't over. It had only begun. Suddenly, his comlink chirped a brief encrypted message flashing on his HUD. You're not alone. Find Rhea. She knows the truth. Stephen's heart pounded. Who was Rhea? He didn't know, but the past was reaching for him. Through the void, and the shadows were growing. He had to face them or be consumed. Asterisk, the core archive lay beneath the drift like a buried heart, sealed away behind layers of reinforced alloy and forgotten security protocols. Stephen stood before the imposing blast doors of Sector Sigma 4, the cold gleam of his plasma torch reflecting off the dull metal. The faint hiss of the unlocking sequence echoed through the chamber, a slow mechanical breath after decades of silence. Inside, the archive was a labyrinth, narrow corridors lined with data vaults and quantum drives, their surfaces etched with layers of dust and neglect. The air tasted stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of decaying circuitry and lost knowledge. Stephen's footsteps echoed as he pressed deeper, the soft whir of his datapad scanning for access codes the only accompaniment. Every terminal he passed blinked faintly to life, responding to his override credentials. The deeper he went, the heavier the weight of secrets pressed on him. Finally, he reached the central vault, an imposing cylinder suspended by magnetic fields, humming with dormant power. This was the repository of the drift's most classified data, the records of solar phenomena, experimental energy projects, and most importantly, the siphon system's blueprints. With a practiced hand, Stephen initiated the upload. The vault's surface parted like the petals of a mechanical flower, revealing the quantum core within, a swirling nexus of entangled data streams and encrypted memory banks. The screen before him flickered, and lines of alien code cascaded across the interface. At first, the symbols seemed indecipherable, an intricate tapestry woven from patterns that defied human logic. But as Stephen's AI assistant, Arca, began decoding, the message emerged, a map of energy flows, intersecting with the star's core like veins in flesh. Then, a hidden layer peeled back, revealing something chilling, a schematic of an alien. Siphon, not just a passive device, but a living system designed to bleed stellar energy into a subdimensional reservoir. The siphon was active, and Hood had been using it to accelerate the star's decay. Stephen's breath caught, but there was more. Embedded within the code was a control algorithm, a failsafe, or perhaps a master key. It detailed how to reroute the siphon's output to either collapse the star entirely or stabilize it by redistributing the energy to nearby systems. His fingers hovered over the console. Suddenly, a sharp pulse surged through the station's network, an intrusion attempt. The archive's security matrix flared, activating countermeasures that scrambled Stephen's displays and triggered an alarm. Security breach detected, Arca warned. Intrusion source: Radiant Order neural uplink. Estimated proximity: 200 meters. Stephen's mind raced. Hood was closer than he realized. He grabbed the decrypted code fragments, sealed them in an encrypted container, and bolted for the exit. Behind him, the soft echo of chanting, "Let the light take you," drifted through the corridors. Growing louder, Stephen's pulse quickened. The battle for the dying sun had entered its deadliest phase. The Helios drift shuddered beneath Stephen's feet like a dying heartbeat, each tremor a grim reminder of the sun's accelerating collapse. The station's corridors were bathed in emergency red light, flickering sporadically as power grids overloaded and safety protocols failed one after another. Radiation levels outside the shielding had skyrocketed, bleeding into the habitation sectors like poison mist. The gravity generators struggled to maintain stability, their hum distorted into harsh, grinding tones. Somewhere deep within the station, the siphon's hum, that unnatural pulse of stolen energy, had grown louder, resonating with a terrible urgency. Stephen stood before the entrance to the solar spine sector, a narrow, heavily shielded tunnel carved into the station's core, leading to the siphon array. Beyond that, the sun's energy was bled raw, siphoned into dark channels beyond human comprehension. Beside him, Rhea adjusted her suit's environmental regulators, eyes sharp and steady. Marek was checking the final seals on their equipment, the scars on his face lit by the flickering panels. The air between them was tense, thick with unspoken fears and fragile hope. "We have one shot at this," Stephen said, voice rough with exhaustion. "If we don't shut down the siphon, the supernova will consume us all." Rhea nodded. "Order fanatics are already mobilizing. We won't get a warm welcome." Marek loaded his plasma cutter. "Then we make it a cold one." They entered the tunnel. The walls glowed faintly with embedded fiber optics, illuminating a narrow path lined with control conduits and sensor arrays. The heat increased with every step, a rising tide of radiation and solar flux pressing against the station's shields. Halfway through, an explosion rocked the tunnel. Debris rained down. The emergency lights faltered. "Fanatics," Marek growled. "They know we're coming." Shouts echoed behind them, distorted by the metal shell. Stephen's heart pounded. "Keep moving. We're almost there." At the tunnel's end, the siphon chamber loomed, a cathedral of alien technology fused with human engineering. The array pulsed with crimson light, tendrils of energy weaving in and out of crystalline cores that resonated with the stars. Tortured song. Stephen moved to the main console, fingers flying over ancient interfaces. The code was complex, layered with alien algorithms and human overrides. The siphon's shutdown sequence was initiated, but an error flashed. "It's damaged," Rhea said, voice tense. "We can't stop it here," Marek cursed. "The control tower. It's the core of the system. We have to reroute the shutdown from there." Stephen grimaced. "That means going through the command sector, through Hood's stronghold. And we don't have a choice," Rhea said firmly. "For the sun, for everyone." They prepared their suits for the final leg, sealing helmets and checking oxygen levels. The siphon's pulse quickened, shaking the chamber as if the star itself was resisting. Stephen took a deep breath. "Let's end this." The last horizon awaited. The command sector loomed like a monolith, carved from darkness itself, its jagged silhouette cutting sharply against the blood-red glow of the dying sun. The airlock hissed open with a slow, ominous breath, releasing a wave of stale, ionized air tinged with the faint scent of burnt circuits and whispered prayers. Stephen, Rhea, and Marek stepped inside, their boots echoing hollowly in the vast chamber. Walls lined with ancient machinery fused with the alien siphon technology. A humming pulse of the siphon reverberated through the floor beneath them. An ominous heartbeat growing ever louder. At the far end stood Hood, no longer the man Stephen once knew, but a titan forged of flesh and code. his form interwoven with circuits pulsing bright crimson. His eyes glowed with unnatural light, a veil of digital distortion rippling around him like a living storm. "Welcome, Stephen." Hood's voice resonated, layered with both human cadence and machine precision. "You have come far, but this is where the veil unravels." Stephen raised his pulse driver, fingers steady despite the weight of the moment. "This ends now, Hood. Your siphon is killing the star and us." Hood smiled, a gesture both cruel and serene. "No, my old friend. It is awakening the star's true purpose. The universe is not a closed system. Light is a gateway, and I have become its key." The chamber shuddered as the siphon's energy surged, tendrils of luminous power lashing out, twisting reality around them. The walls shimmered, folding in and out of existence, revealing glimpses of impossible landscapes, fractured dimensions, where stars burned with colors unseen and time flowed like liquid glass. Rhea shouted over the chaos. "Stephen!" The control nodes, they're linked to his neural crown. "We need to sever that connection." Marek sprang into action, plasma cutter slicing through cables feeding Hood's neural implant. Hood screamed, a sound fractured between agony and digital distortion. Stephen lunged toward the main console, fingers flying across the alien interface. The shutdown sequence initiated, the siphon's pulse weakening but fighting back fiercely. "Hold on," Stephen yelled as Hood's form shimmered, beginning to dissolve into a cascade of light and data. "You won't rewrite the stars. Not today." With a final keystroke, the siphon systems collapsed. The red glow faded, replaced by a gentle blue light that rippled through the chamber. The station's core stabilizers hummed back to life, pushing back the encroaching entropy. Hood's voice echoed one last time, fading like a distant signal. "The light never truly dies." The veil lifted outside, the dying sun's surface stilled, its furious storms calming into a steady, life-giving pulse. Stephen sank to his knees, the weight of salvation and loss settling over him. The stars whispered their thanks, and for the first time in a long time, the universe breathed easy. The Helios drift had settled into an uneasy calm, a fragile exhale after the storm that nearly tore the universe apart. The station's vast corridors, once filled with frantic footsteps and alarms, were now quiet, punctuated only by the soft hum of repairing systems and the distant murmur of life rekindled. Stephen stood at the observation deck, gazing out at the star. The red giant had softened, its raging storm smoothed into gentle waves of light. It was not healed. No star could fully reverse the end, but it was alive. Breathing behind him, Rhea approached silently, her expression shadowed yet hopeful. "You did what no one thought possible." Stephen didn't turn. "We did it, together." The scars of their battles lingered, physical and invisible. Marek's absence weighed heavily. The Salvage King had volunteered for the final breach and hadn't returned. His sacrifice a silent echo in Stephen's mind. "Do you think the Radiant Order is finished?" Rhea asked, voice low. Stephen sighed. "Ideas don't die. They mutate, grow underground." Hood was a symptom, not the disease. She nodded. "Then what now?" Stephen turned, eyes bright with the hard light of resolve. "We rebuild. We learn from the light, not worship it blindly." The siphon was alien, yes, but it was also a tool, a weapon. We must guard against both. A soft chime interrupted. Them, a RKA's voice, calm and clear. Unidentified signal detected on outer drift. Pattern matches anomalous quantum fluctuation, consistent with dormant siphon activity. Stephen's jaw tightened. "It's not over." Rhea stepped beside him, determination blazing. "Then we stand ready." Together, they watched the star's gentle pulse through the reinforced viewport, a beacon in the dark, The universe was vast, dangerous, and endlessly alive, and so were they. Asterisk. The remnants of the Radiant Order no longer marched in overt crusades, but their shadows lingered whispers in the dark corners of the drift, coded transmissions veiled beneath layers of innocuous data. Stephen knew that the battle for truth was never simply a war of fire and steel, but of ideas born in the silence between stars. In the dim glow of the research sanctum, Stephen sat before a holographic map of the drift's outer edges, fingers, tracing lines of quantum flux and residual siphoned signatures. Each pulsing node was a spark potential flare-ups of the alien technology, dormant but alive. Somewhere out there, fragments of Hood's vision survived. Rhea leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. These fluctuations, they're growing, slow but steady. Stephen nodded. A siphon's not just a device. It's a seed. It grows, beneath the surface waiting for the right conditions. Behind them, ARKA's voice was calm but insistent. Sensor arrays detect an unregistered vessel approaching the drift's periphery. Identification, unknown. Signature, low quantum emissions, but advanced shielding. Another spark, Stephen murmured. Rhea's gaze hardened. We need to find it before it finds us. The crew assembled swiftly, veterans of battles, both physical and ideological. As the Cerebrant slipped from its berth, the station's veins thrummed with urgency. The vastness outside was dark and cold, canvas where hope and fear danced in equal measure. Stephen's thoughts drifted to Hood's. Final words. The veil between worlds was thin, and the light that illuminated might just be a gateway to something far older and more dangerous than humanity imagined. But for now, the embers of that veil still glowed faintly, waiting, and Stephen knew their fight was far from over. Asterisk, the vastness. Beyond Helios drift stretched into infinity, a tapestry woven with distant stars, ghost nebulae, and silent echoes of long-dead worlds. Stephen stood alone on the observation platform of the Cerebrant, the curvature of the stabilized red giant painting the viewport in hues of molten amber and cooling embers. Behind him, the hum of the station was steady, a heart resuming its rhythm after a brutal storm. But the stillness outside was deceptive. Somewhere, hidden within the shadows of spacetime's fabric, the veil between dimensions fluttered thin as a breath, fragile as a promise. Stephen's eyes lingered on the star's gentle pulse. The siphon was silent now, its alien architecture dormant but not destroyed. It was a wound, healing slowly, a mystery yet to be fully unraveled. A soft chime drew his attention. ARKA's voice filtered through the room, serene yet urgent. Unidentified signal detected, frequency unknown. Pattern indicates intelligent origin. Source, beyond the drift's periphery. Stephen's fingers tightened around the railing. The universe was whispering once more. And somewhere beyond the veil, the next chapter waited, unwritten, infinite, and unforgiving. He inhaled deeply, the weight of survival and hope entwined in the silence. Prepare the Cerebrant, he said quietly. We're not done yet. Beyond the last light, the future awaited.